Owner's remorse.
Yes.
I don't agree.
Have I become the Craig Jabir yet, Councillor Craig?
He's very good, Mr. Chairman. Much better than Wayne Barnes.
Hello, Lee.
You'll be able to quieten things down here with a very straightforward paper here today. Thank you.
Not after last
Because
time.
that's generally what happens when I'm here, Mr. Chair.
Sometimes.
Thank you, Letitia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. The property I'm here to discuss today comprises two parcels of 51 Stamford Park Road in Mount Roskill. The cumulative total of the two parcels of land is just over 1,700 square metres. The two subject sites are part of a larger council-owned site which comprises nearly 4,000 square metres. The site was originally acquired by the Crown for the extension of State Highway 20 through Mount Roskill. It was subsequently vested in Auckland City Council as recreation reserve, and most of the entire site was formed as walking and cycleway that leads to Keith Hay Park and is to be retained in council ownership for this purpose. The subject parcels of land that are up for consideration today were not required for the walking and cycleway and were identified by the Parks and Recreation Policy Team in 2015 has not been required for parks purposes. The rationalisation process for these two parcels of land commenced in August 2015. No alternative service uses were identified, and the feedback we've received has been supportive of the proposed reserve revocation and divestment. Final revocation of the reserve status will be subject to completing the statutory requirements set out in the Reserves Act 1977, and I'd just like to note that the sale proceeds from reserves are placed in reserves accounts so that funds can be used to acquire other land for reserve purposes or the maintenance of existing reserves. Happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Fletcher.
I was just going to move
Move
it.
it. You'll move it.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Councillor Clow. I don't think there's any.
Mr. Chair, just a
Councillor Brewer.
just a point of clarification in the executive summary. It notes here that Panuku is required to come up with a combined sale value of 45 million to the year June 30, 2017. Yet my understanding in the long-term plan it was the divestment program is more like 66 million a year. So I just wondered if there was a point of clarification that perhaps there's divestment going on outside Panuku's remit. But I just invite comment from officers on that.
Through the Chair, yes, our SOI target is based on what we believe we can deliver every year. That was set independently of the of the 66 million, I think it is, per year in the LTP.
Okay, so this reflects your SOI, not our 10-year budget. Thank you.
Right, it's moved and seconded. I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declare that carried. Thank you, Letitia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
It's easy.
Next item is 13, and we have Christine Olsen from Community Empowerment Manager here for this item, and Graham Bodman is here as well. Top team. Christine, thank you very much. You're going to give us a run through on how things are going in this area. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this report is an update as requested from this committee in June last year. The committee requested an update in July on the implementation of the Empowered Communities approach. So the report sets out the focus that the Community Empowerment Unit has had in implementation. It gives some examples of some empowered community approach examples that have been going on in the community, and also outlines the feedback we've had from local boards. So just coming around now is I think there were 2 local boards that hadn't had their business meetings by the time the report was due, so they're coming now, and just some other overview information of the Empowered Communities approach. Councillor Wood has asked me to give you a little, very brief presentation about the structure of the unit, and so I've just got a couple of slides here. So the unit is made up of 5 teams. 2 of those teams, Youth Connections and the Community Contracts team, are the Community Contracts team is funded mainly through external contracts, and Youth Connections jointly with the Tyndall Foundation. So the other 3 teams are focused very much on the delivery of the Empowered Communities approach through local boards and through our regional work program. So we have 19 strategic brokers across the 21 local boards. They're based in local board offices and working very closely on the delivery of those local board work programs.
Thanks, Mary.
And then we have what we call the Practice Hub, which is made up of the operations team and our practice team. And the purpose of that team is to provide technical and specialist support for delivery and to develop the practice across council of the Empowered Communities approach. So I can make this work. You see the Practice Hub and the strategic brokers working together. And just finally, Councillor Wood had asked, sorry, that's quite hard to see, but that gives you the name of the strategic broker assigned to each local board. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Right, are there any questions? Kathy?
How do governing body members fit into the model?
Well, through the chair, the team's got 2 areas of focus. So it delivers on and provides advice to local board work programs and priority activities, and then also has a regional work program which is driven by policy, which is determined by the governing body, or through other requests or responses that may come through the governing body or from other sources. For instance, our response to homelessness or graffiti eradication and a number of other regional program activity.
Got the regional link. How do the local councillors link into the model? In terms of wearing a ward councillor hat.
As usual, we've missed out.
Through the chair, to be honest, I haven't thought about that specifically, but I would imagine that the way things happen at the moment is that councillors may approach either myself or Christine with any specific queries that may occur or influence broader policy decisions. What we're trying to do is be much more structured, or to be structured in our approach through having agreed work programs, but we've built in some room for flexible responses, acknowledging that we're working in quite a dynamic environment, and requests or work could come from multiple sources, which we can respond to on a as required basis.
If I might just continue the dialogue, Mr. Chairman, my feeling is just a little bit apart from this, as the ward councillor, that this is something that we're doing with boards, that boards are driving from the bottom up. And we need to link into it somehow, and I don't feel linked into this. Even though we developed the policy, we had really good linkage to develop the policy that got us to here, I feel now that we're kind of... So it was about knowing what's going on in the ward, knowing where everything's at, how do we stay connected with this?
Well, through the chair, I mean, we'll take that on board. Thank you, Councillor Casey.
Councillor Fletcher?
Thank you. Graham, I applaud the approach that you've taken to this, but I just draw your attention to the request that we made through the CEO that there be special recognition of the Pacifica community, and I'd like, in the examples that you've given us, I'd just be really interested to see how you see the Empowered Communities approach improving within the Pacifica community.
So one of the 5 key focus areas is about increasing diverse participation, and I guess through that Pacifica is a key stakeholder. We are certainly looking at, one of our key initiatives is looking at how we work more diversely and how we are more inclusive. We have a number of Pacifica staff who are closely linked to their communities and to projects within communities.
Mr. Chairman, through you, I thank Christine for that response, but this was a matter that has been explored right through to the CEO committee, and that when we're talking about diversity, that is good, but when you think of the responsibility we have for having the largest population of Pacifica people in the world, in this city, my view would be that it would be good to see some specific reference, rather than in the umbrella of diversity, some reference to Pacifica peoples. So I would ask you, Mr. Chairman, if that could be entertained. Is there any guidance that you can give me at this point on how that could be achieved?
Through the chair, we can make sure that we get some examples of some of the work we're doing in the Pacifica community, and I can assure you that it's a key focus of ours. Is that helpful?
Thank you. Mr. McDonald?
Yeah, I was just going to ask a question really around the, Māori responsiveness aspects within this ECA and within this approach. When you go to evaluate it at the end of the day, what sorts of things would you be looking for in that evaluation to see that this approach has been responsive to Māori and to other communities?
Through the chair. So our evaluation plan has just been signed off, and we have Shaw and Whāriki, so they have been contracted to do that over 3 years, and they have a key focus on measuring outcomes for Māori, and we have been talking with the mana whenua hui around the development of case studies for that evaluation and how to make sure that we are including Māori specifically, the Māori voice specifically in that evaluation.
You, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I just want to support Councillor Casey. And it's I think a discussion to be picked up in the next council, which flows over into the discussion about the relationship between ward councillors and local boards, and I think part of this work needs to be addressed during that discussion, because I think there are some gaps. So my question is how we look at these very, very good examples, and some of which I know well, how we keep an overall picture of the fact that we're still trying to work cohesively and collaboratively as one enormous organisation, driving a series of goals that will be delivered in a place-based way, in a way that suits the community. But our local boards, it's very easy to hand out some slugs of money and do things, there are some grants of slightly questionable origin that have come to my notice in the last little while, that don't necessarily link into the big picture. So, somehow it's saying empower down at grassroots level, link in via the boards to the local councillors, and that gives that bigger picture about the fact that we're still trying to achieve the goals of the organisation. So somewhere in there, Mr. Chair, is a slightly long-winded question for how are we measuring if we're getting along that path? Are we measuring if we're making progress along that path?
Through the chair, I think there's 2 responses to that, and hopefully they answer your question. I think for the first time, because we have come together as one unit, we are able to look at all 21 local board work programs and actually pull out what are the what are the practice themes in there, so that we can actually build consistent practice, obviously being responsive to local need, which is always going to be diverse, but actually having some consistent practice that sits around that, and we're also picking that up through our regional work program. And in terms of evaluation, I think that's probably something that will be picked up through the evaluation process.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Chair. I think that addresses the issue. It's just making sure that with a lot of these that we've got time, space and a bit of funding for evaluation, because each board will have its work program, quite right. Some of it will be suited to each local community. Absolutely, that's what community empowerment is. But somewhere it still needs to contribute towards the greater whole, because there is, you know, the boards, despite what we hear from the boards, there is a lot of money within those board budgets that still needs to be contributing towards the sum of the greater whole. And I think it's quite right that the local councillors feel that they've got a role in the oversight and understanding and partnering with that.